We also want to talk about some developments right now, and we're getting some insight too here on Live Impact News. So this is an ongoing saga that we've been watching here in North Carolina and quite frankly nationwide, in the sense that this is the last undecided race from this past November election, and it continues on with more and more court activity, if you will. So we wanted to bring in North Carolina Democratic Party here representatives. We have Kat Lawson and Anderson Clayton here to talk about the situation with Allison Riggs and Jefferson Griffin. And for folks who might not have gotten the latest update here, this federal appeals court now has temporarily blocked election officials now from contacting voters who had disputed ballots. And this is a 2-to-1 decision that we saw, granting the stay request of Democratic incumbent Allison Riggs. So let's bring in Kat Lawson and Anderson Clayton now. Can you both hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. All right. So this has been lengthy, to say the least, and we've seen a lot of back and forth in the courts at this point. What is the position here of North Carolina Dems as far as not only the length of this process, but also how this is kind of playing out now in the court system with ways that, certain ballots are being challenged?
I think we're proud to be able to see the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals uphold a stay in this process, to be able to make sure that voters are heard and making sure that, the process is able to play out in the way that it needs to through the courts. But this has been an extremely long and drawn out process for a reason, because Republicans believe that they can litigate away a loss. And for folks that have not followed this court case for the last 6 months, Jefferson Griffin lost a seat to North Carolina Supreme Court Justice Allison Riggs by 734 votes out of 5.5 million votes cast. And instead of conceding the election like he should have done, and like every other Republican that lost the election cycle in North Carolina and the down ballot did in November, he chose to turn around and challenge over 67,000 voters across the state of North Carolina, most of which that are being challenged now and that have been allowed to have this cure process potentially go into effect are military voters that have served our country, and are being challenged right now by someone who has also used the same method of absentee ballot and form that they did. Jefferson Griffin himself has been a military and overseas voter. And so it is wild right now to see Republicans challenge election results over 6 months after the election should have already been over with.
Now, we are hearing from, the Griffin camp and the GOP that, this is an effort to try to make sure that only legal votes are counted. It appears as though, throughout the court process here, eventually we saw that there are some ballots that have been declared that they shouldn't have been counted. Overseas voters who apparently never lived in the U.S., but parents who were declared North Carolina residents. Do you think that, that ruling disqualifies some of the argument that there were only legal ballots being counted, or what is your, response to that decision?
So there's a couple different problems with the way that Griffin and Republicans are framing these challenges. So first of all, Griffin, especially as somebody who is a sitting judge and who is wanting to be a Supreme Court justice, should know that there are ways that you are allowed to challenge voters and challenge the eligibility of a voter. And he hasn't been doing that the right way. And so even if there was any truth to his claims, which there's not, he missed deadlines. He's doing it wrong, frankly. And he's also picking and choosing who he challenges in order to get a win, not because he actually cares about the integrity of North Carolina's voter rolls. If he cared about those issues, he could have and should have filed this lawsuit, filed these claims before the election happened. But in fact, when Republicans did file a lawsuit with these exact same arguments before November, they were told by a federal court that they were still too late. It was still too close to an election, and they weren't going to be allowed to bring these challenges in federal court before November, and they had to kind of live with voters as they existed for this particular election cycle. That wasn't good enough for him, so he decided to go ahead and just repackage that exact same theory and bring this lawsuit now. So first of all, he's already shown that he is willing to ignore standard processes and rules, which are fundamentally the things that we want judges to care about and to enforce for everybody, not just for the people for whom it's convenient and who are on their partisan side. But separate from that, there's not a single voter in this challenge list that Griffin has actually produced any evidence showing that they are ineligible to vote. These are US citizens, these are North Carolina residents. They are people who satisfied the laws that were in place in November of 2024. And he has completely failed to prove otherwise. And it is his job to actually produce proof here. Instead, he's relying on technical interpretations of the law that are brand new, that are novel, that were not in place for him when he voted in the past, that were not in place in prior election cycles, in order to, again, specifically target voters from a handful of counties and try to get them to not vote. And for the folks that he claims are people who have never lived in North Carolina, obviously, we don't know. We haven't actually looked into all of them, but there has been a lot of reporting saying that it's just bad data on his part. He's relying on shoddy research and bad data to make these claims, and then basically saying nobody should be allowed to call him on it or look behind to see if he's telling the truth before these votes get thrown out.
Now, I mean, we've brought coverage to our viewers here on Live Impact News here on WCNC Plus of some of the pro-rigs rallies and various coverage that we've had, related to this ongoing saga. One of the things that sticks out to me was, quite emotional, plea from Riggs to, end this whole situation. And, the fact that, it sounded like by her perspective and many others at some of these rallies that there were much larger implications, that what's going on is really not about just this one race, that there could be, larger consequences and implications for elections going forward based on what happens here.
Absolutely. That's what Republicans are doing, using North Carolina to see how much that they can push a legal precedent. And they're using friendly courts that are Republican dominated to be able to do it. The North Carolina Court of Appeals, Democrats sit at a 12-3 minority on that bench right now. And so it's not surprising when you see a court that Jefferson Griffin sits on uphold a decision to keep him and to give him an election seat right now. And it's not surprising to see the North Carolina Supreme Court, where we sit at a 5-2 minority right now, and Justice Riggs recused herself from this case, to be able to see that play out. And what we're having right in the state is being able to see these challenges utilized in other states going forward in other election cycles. It's not just about North Carolina in 2024. It is about Pennsylvania and Michigan and Georgia and every other state in the country that Republicans would like to litigate away their losses in, versus actually accept what voters voted for at the ballot box. Trying to subvert democracy is the number one honestly strategy right now that I can see from the Republican Party about how they plan to win elections in the future. And Democrats have got to be there and be able to stop it.
So I guess as far as what comes next, we know, as we just mentioned, that this appeals court, it's a temporary block that we're seeing on officials inevitably contacting voters to let them know that they need to resolve some issues with that. But what comes next, and what would be your, I don't want to say your next steps, because I know you probably don't want to share too much of that, but what will be happening in this situation, going forward?
Well, best case scenario going forward is Jefferson Griffin concedes, and he does what he should have done back in November, or at the very least back when the recounts were all finished, and acknowledge that Justice Riggs beat him fair and square. And he could stop this right now, and he should stop this right now. Assuming he doesn't, we're now in front of the Eastern District in federal court. So we are finally at a stage in this lawsuit where we are dealing with the real issues. So Griffin is now needing to actually explain for the first time why it is that he thinks that these challenges do not violate the Constitution. We believe he's going to be unsuccessful at that. We're going to be able to successfully explain to Judge Myers, and then if we need to the Fourth Circuit, that picking voters from 6 counties to challenge their votes is a violation of equal protection, and trying to change the rules of an election after that election is already finished and 6 months after that election has been finished is a violation of due process. And so we believe that we're going to win those issues, and that will be, at that point, that will have to be the end of it. At some point, Griffin is going to have to accept the loss that he rightfully earned back in November.
For folks who are watching this and, are thinking, what should I be doing? Let's just say they're a North Carolina voter and they're seeing this and they're like, I think I might be falling under this category of, my vote is being challenged. What do you recommend folks do on that front? As far as every other person, every other voter, do you have recommendations that you are telling folks what to do as far as, either not only just influencing the outcome of the situation, but just going forward in general?
Right now, what we're asking folks to do is sign up on ncdp.org/protect the vote, because we're going to be notifying everyone through rapid response mechanisms about if a cure process goes into effect and what they would need to do in order to cure their ballot. Because as of right now, we do not have that process laid out from the State Board of Elections or from the courts at this moment in time. And so we want to make sure that any guidance we are giving to a voter is correct guidance and is going to make sure that their vote is securely counted and valid after we go through this process in full. So we're asking people to make sure they sign up on our website, and we're going to keep people updated. Justice Riggs is also making sure that she gives weekly updates and are alerting people via social media. So if you are somebody that would rather follow somebody and get your media that way too, please feel free to follow her on all of the social accounts, and we'll make sure to keep you posted. The State Board of Elections did release the list of the Guilford County voters that Jefferson Griffin is targeting and would be impacted if the cure process was to go forward. So if you are a Guilford County voter, you can check the State Board of Elections website and see if your name is on the list there. Otherwise, though, there are still potentially caught up in the courts right now 5 other counties that could be impacted by Griffin's complaints if the federal courts let this go through. And so the State Board of Elections has not released that list yet, though.
Okay. All right. Sounds like much more to come here on this ongoing saga. Kat Lawson, Anderson Clayton, we appreciate your time and you taking a few moments here to join us here on Live Impact News and share more about your perspective with our viewers. So keep us posted on your front. And of course, we'll keep folks posted on anything that comes out of the Griffin camp as well.